much. Huge thank you to Peg and to Linda for inviting me here. I can't tell you how delighted and honored I am to be here tonight. I flew in from Phoenix this afternoon and went from 95 degrees to 65. And I can't remember the last time I felt 65. It might have been sometime in January. I actually felt a little chill walking next to the water and seeing the water too. I'm parched. I'm parched from having lived in the desert for so long. And it was a pretty unbearable summer this time around. So delighted, and soul feels good here. So thank you so much for having me. And thank you to the fellow readers, the writers, the readers that I'm reading with tonight. And also thank you so much for coming out tonight and sharing this evening with me. If you'll indulge me, I just love this idea of fever. And when Peg sent that email talking about the theme, I thought, I'm going to write a kick-ass poem about fever. And of course I didn't. I did something better. I brought a poem, one of my favorites that I think addresses that theme. So if you'll indulge me, I'll start with a poem from Jane Hirschfield, one of my favorites. It's called Heat. My mare, when she was in heat, would travel the fence line for hours, wearing the impatience in her feet into the ground. Not a stallion for miles, I'd assure her, give it up. She'd widen her nostrils, see the wind for news, be moving again, her underbelly darkening with sweat. Then stop at the gate a moment, wait to see what I might do. Oh, I knew how it was for her, easily recognized myself in that wide lust. Came to stand in the pasture just to see it played. Offered a hand, a bucket of grain, a minute's distraction from passion, the most I gave. Then she'd return to what burned her, the fence, so hoping I might let her free. I'd envy her then, to be so restlessly sure of heat and need and what it takes to feed the wanting that we are. Only a gap to open the width of a mare, the rest would take care of itself. Surely, I knew that, who had the power of bucket and bridle. She would beseech me, sidle up, be gone, as life is short, but desire is long. Isn't that so good? I wish I'd written that. I'm just going to share two poems from my first chapbook. It's called Crash Landing in the Plaza of an Unknown City, which is really it's a line from the Fellini's film that he never got to make. It was supposed to be his magnum opus, and he was never able to finish it. And it was about a crash landing in the Plaza of an Unknown City that really kind of encapsulated what it felt for me to be a part of an immigrant family. My parents both survived the Korean War, and even though they had moved past that and had this kind of very comfortable life in Korea, they decided that they didn't want to ever have to experience another war. Immigrated to America, didn't speak the language, had I think $500 and a family of 6, which also included my grandmother. And so that kind of encapsulated that feeling for me of being definitely crash landing and then trying to figure out the rest of my life in a new country. This is called Photograph of My Grandfather in a Western Business Suit, 1950. Not in the 3 kingdoms of antiquity, but in the tiny kingdom inside of my skull, I imagine Hanabuchi, a wealthy silk factory owner, married to my grandmother and with 3 concubines, honorable, social, de facto circumstance. Father to how many children, I'll never know. Where I begin, ceremoniously, is the day he dies. Yuk-e-o, first day of the war. Vicissitudes of fortune we've learned to accept, like stones into our pockets, stones into our mouths, our silence, intensifying sound, gunfire and bombs, and what to wail when a widow flees with her children, leaves my 10-year-old mother under a chestnut tree to die. Gunshot wounds and nowhere to go, the factory gone, the house gone. The trouble with death is we are always dying. Starvation or exposure or war, it doesn't matter. My grandmother will hate my mother all the days of her life. Will tell her, you should have died instead of him. In the last picture taken, my grandfather admires the landscape unfolding, turning white, promises of crocuses, their golden blooms bursting in that final spring before the North Koreans appear, shooting him in the chest for owning this land, for wearing a Western suit. So when my parents immigrated, they didn't have any transferable skills. They had jobs, white-collar jobs, and my mom was actually a nurse in Korea, but when they came, they didn't speak the language, so my dad took a job in a vitamin factory. So this one's very, very biographical. Accident of the vitamin factory, 1976. According to the workman's compensation schedule, my father collected 70 weeks' pay for the loss of his second, third, and fourth fingers, and another 30 for the machine clipping the tip of his pointer and scalping the top of his thumb. His right hand, unfamiliar with factory work and now hewn down to the silhouette of a pistol, learned to squeeze with what was left, a pincer grasp to brush teeth, sign a name, throw a ball to my brother. Those afternoons when all a child wants is to play, he asked my sister and me to rub the ache from the stubs. We needed flesh, pressed and stretched as if it would grow. I did not then comprehend his anxiety, a machine much larger than the one that crippled his hand, a machine that when he healed compelled him to work his remaining fingers to the bone. I did not understand his embarrassment when he shook hands with strangers, or how he no longer looked my mother in the eyes. When my grandmother announced that day, this is the end of us, I went to the hospital, petulant and afraid. He lay sleeping, face colorless, hands suspended like a gauze marionette. I could not have known what it would mean. Months later, when I would crawl into my parents' bed, my father would take the hand, cold and scarred, and place it under my cheek. The next poems are from my second chapbook called Well Enough to Travel, and that was really kind of created out of arriving at a certain age, which I think we call middle age, and being utterly bewildered, and still am. It's just been kind of a crazy, every day is met with a new disillusionment. It kind of reminds me of being in my early 20s. So these are the poems that have come out of that experience. Coyote. I hit him with my right bumper, driving past the last dry creek bed before town. I thought I heard him yelp a quick cry. He was still breathing. His eyes open, looked like any dog's, and his muzzle parted did too. But the teeth and ears were fiercer triangles. His body, torqued due to force, rested there rooted in the asphalt, as his breath came quick and shallow. The gash on his shoulder appeared not to gush blood, but was split open like a crack in the road, and his fur, filled with desert scourge, thistles and thorns turned brown and brittle, seemed never to have bothered him at all. I reached out and touched his front paw, the pads worn to a thick smoothness, the claw rasped down to a nub. The sky darkened in increments, the sun lowering behind a West Wing mountain. I looked in his eyes. As his breaths grew shorter, he stared toward the car, the door still open, the dome light on, the dinging announcing what I had forgotten. Liberation. A 20-something barista at Lux slips me a note with my coffee. He must think I'm as young as he. His jeans hang slack from the studded belt that keeps them up, and his full-grown beard makes him a man the way barista sounds like a Chilean freedom fighter. the way wedding rings make their way into pockets, the way you can believe I love you during sex. He knows nothing beyond himself, only a cappuccino cup of want. I could ignore the cat and mouse cartoons, could try to make myself forget he's closer in age to my son than to me. Or I could forget he scribbled, "Can I buy you another cup? I get off in 30. But no, I want to head out to his place, drink, laugh, talk, wake up hungover in a different world, fashioned by revolution, by oppressed Chileans everywhere. What anyone could do in a dimly lit cafe with skinny jeans, coffee beans, and desire handwritten in hope. This is the last poem. It's an ekphrastic poem that was inspired by Yayoi Kusama installation at the Phoenix Art Museum. If you know Yayoi's work, it's a lot of dots and polka dots and lights, and it's a light installation. And it's the first time that I'd gone, and I was really struck with the experience. The title of her installation is You Who Are Getting Obliterated in the Dancing Swarm of Fireflies, which is also the lead-in title of the poem. And so thank you again for being here. You who are getting obliterated in the dancing swarm of fireflies had best not feel too much. The night train rushes through the meadow, and its two-step rumbling reminds you you are alone. When the room begins to spin, it forms a union with the light. One unceasing streak turns circle, and you, surrounded by mirrors, go vertigo in the immense empty between 1 minute and the next. Fireflies expand into stars. Who are we to find in infinite spaces but ourselves? Call it an ostinato, a vamp, the unchanging refrain of beginnings and endings, starts and stops, resonates in time like steel on steel, and we know it. Somewhere deep in the tall grass, my hands are still fastened to his, holding fast. Thank you.